Yes, today my name is Jacqueline Gerakis, and I am the Expedition Manager for EarthEcho International. We're so excited to have classrooms from all over the globe joining us today as we explore freshwater pollution all the way from rivers to the ocean. So before we get started, I wanted to go over a little bit of housekeeping with you all. We love participation from everyone watching. So how to participate? Ask us questions. If you're watching on YouTube, you can use the Q&A app. And if you're watching directly from our EarthEcho website, you can use the Google form that's beneath the viewer. So please go ahead and post your questions as we continue in the Hangout. And we'll be answering the questions during a few spots in the Hangout and have set aside time at the end for additional questions. As we get started, I'd like to introduce you to everyone that we have live with us on camera today. First, we have Mr. Trogan's class from Coventry Middle School in Coventry, Ohio. Hey there. And we also have Mrs. Shelby's 7th grade class from Will Rogers Middle School in Lawndale, California. And these two teachers were actually fellows that went on expedition with EarthEcho in October this year. So today we're going to get started with our special guest and our host, Mr. Nathan Taxel, who is the Director of Outdoor Education at the Ocean Institute. So take it away, Nathan.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Nathan Taxel. I am the Director of Outdoor Education here at the Ocean Institute in Dana Point, California. For those of you following along on a map, Dana Point is approximately halfway between the cities of San Diego and Los Angeles. So we're located roughly 75 miles from the US-Mexican border on the Pacific coast of California. It is a really lovely place to live. It's about 78 degrees and sunny today here in Southern California. And that's one of the reasons lots and lots and lots of people want to come here and live, because we do have such amazing weather. But when you have lots and lots and lots of people all together in one place, it becomes very possible that our behaviors have a significant impact on our ecosystems. And today we're going to focus how the things that we as humans do on land can and do affect organisms that live in the ocean. We talk about water pollution a lot. We talk about the things that we put into the water a lot or that we take out. But we're going to look at it from a little bit of a broader perspective today and see how the choices that we make on land that may have no direct correlation with the ocean do end up impacting aquatic ecosystems. So let's head right into our living collection room and start looking at some organisms. So we're going to start today with our moon jellies. These are a form of jellyfish, so an invertebrate animal. This is an animal, even though it doesn't look much like the animals we see on a daily basis, that lives in the ocean. Moon jellies here are native to the waters outside of Southern California, as well as lots of other places. They're very common all over the planet. And these animals serve as the primary food source for lots of organisms, but in particular for sea turtles. Sea turtles love to eat moon jellies. And so I'm going to pan over here and look at another part of the exhibit. For the students who are on live, are these jellyfish or are these something else? What do you guys think? And anyone who's following along, answer amongst yourselves. Are we looking at jellyfish or are we looking at something else?
Yeah, they're tied up.
Yeah, that's right. These are actually plastic bags. And this is one of my all-time favorite exhibits that we have here at the Ocean Institute, because it really kind of captures what we're all about. It's hard for us to tell the difference between these plastic bags and these moon jellies. So you can imagine that for a sea turtle or other aquatic predator, it would be near impossible. So plastic bags and plastic in general is one of the biggest issues that the ocean and ocean animals face. Here in Southern California, we've actually banned disposable plastic bags in our coastal communities. So when I go to the grocery store, I either have to bring my own bags or buy reusable bags, which is really, really exciting, and a great policy step that I think will impact the organisms that live in the ocean right here off of our coast. All right, we're going to move on and look at not just one organism, but an entire habitat and a food chain. So this here is a purple sea urchin. This is the thing you really don't want to step on. It's very spiny. These guys also live here off our coast, and they feed primarily on kelp. That's what this leafy stuff is. That's kelp, and this sea urchin is eating it. And so the sea urchin eats the kelp. And then over here, we're going to look at a couple of different sea stars. Here's a bat star. This is they're known as starfish, colloquially, but this is definitely not a fish. It does live in the ocean, so we call it sea stars. This is a bat star. And then over here, I have some knobby sea stars. And the neat thing about these guys is that they eat sea urchins. So the sea urchins eat the kelp, and the sea stars eat the sea urchins. Now, unfortunately, what we've seen going on up and down the Pacific coast over the last few years is something they call sea star wasting. The sea stars appear to be getting sick, and they're dying off in very, very large quantities. This is a big problem for lots of reasons. I mean, for the sea stars themselves, obviously, it's a problem, but it also has greater impacts throughout the ecosystem. So we don't know why it's happening yet. There are some different theories. Some folks are connecting it to climate change and change in water chemistry. As the ocean temperature changes, its chemistry changes. Some people are relating it to other sources of pollution, things that we're putting in the water. So we're all pretty much in agreement that in some way human behavior is causing the sea star wasting. And so you might ask, what does that have to do with the sea urchins? So I'll ask you, for our classrooms that are live, what do you guys think will happen to the prey, the sea urchin, when the predator, the sea star, when their population declines dramatically? What do you guys think? And for those of you who aren't live with us, Jacqueline, are you catching that answer? Because I'm not.
Hi, Mrs. Shelby. Did you have a question for the classroom?
My students have answers, and we're going to the starfish die off, or the sea urchins that are overpopulated?
He's saying if the sea stars die off, will the sea urchins overpopulate?
Nathan, were you able to hear that question?
Yeah. All right. The camera's right here.
Oh, okay, so if the starfish die, are the sea urchins going to overpopulate?
Nathan, you are on mute. Can you turn mute off so we can hear your answer, please?
There we go. So what I was discussing was that when the stars are no longer present, the sea urchin population grows very, very rapidly because there's nothing eating them. And they actually will start to eat too much of the kelp. The kelp in the kelp forest very much is a keystone species for that ecosystem. It creates the food and the shelter and the habitat for lots of other organisms. And if there's nothing controlling the sea urchins, then they eat too much of it, and it can have impacts that could potentially destroy or damage entire ecosystems. So the relationship between two species, the sea stars and the sea urchins, as that gets interrupted, can have tremendous impacts on the entire ecosystem. This is something that we don't just see in marine ecosystems. It's something that we see across the planet and throughout the country. The story of reintroducing wolves to Yellowstone National Park very much mirrors this, in that the deer were out of control, the predator species, the wolves, were reintroduced, and all of a sudden they're seeing plants and animals and birds and things that they've never seen before. So we're heading outside. We've got all kinds of interesting field trips going on today. Gonna turn my camera back around.
Nathan, while you're walking, I had some questions from Druid Hills Middle School. And they wanted
Great.
to know what they can do to stop plastic from getting in the ocean. And with all the wildlife that is eating plastic, how will that affect humans that eat fish and other marine organisms?
A couple different questions. We're just going to pan over Dana Point Harbor here. The first we do to keep out of the ocean. So there are a lot to do it. There are some policy. So our state, local or federal government making should agree ag ban, California. Other versions think a lot or think about a lot here in Southern California and in general at the Ocean Institute is the microplastics, the beads and things that are starting to show up in various personal care products and shampoos and scrubs and things like that. So all of those tiny little plastic pellets that are used in those products as a abrasive skin product. You can choose not to purchase those or use them. So some of it, like I said, is individual choices. Some is things that we can do as a community through our government. And then it's also about raising awareness. So, you know, all of us who care deeply about the ocean and about the planet in general have the opportunity to speak with, to talk to impact everyone that we encounter on a daily basis, and try and get them to be as inspired as we are about protecting our planet and these organisms and the ocean in particular. Jacqueline, can you repeat the second question again?
Sure. So the question is, with all the wildlife that is eating plastic, how will that affect humans that eat fish and other marine organisms? And then the other part of that question
I'm sure Jacqueline will
is,
get back to
there anything we can do?
And some other questions here shortly. But since I know we have a limited time together, I do want to feature or highlight a couple of other interesting organisms. So this animal here, there are a number of fish in this tank, but the one I want to talk to you about is the one that's coming to the surface right now. This is a red-tailed triggerfish. This is a tropical fish species that we happen to have caught by accident right here off the coast of Dana Point. And while to those of you from colder climes, more northern climes, it may look and feel tropical here, we don't technically qualify for that. The water here is much colder than, say, in the Caribbean or further south, closer to the equator. So the question becomes, why was this animal hanging out here in this part of Southern California, at least 1,000 miles from where one would expect to find it? What brought this animal all the way up here? If we can hear from some of our schools live, some ideas or suggestions, that would be great. And those of you who are following along, talk amongst yourselves about what What might bring an animal like this so far out of its natural habitat? Get any responses from our classrooms?
I believe one reason why this could possibly happen is because maybe someone dumped that fish and it's a natural environment.
I believe that
I believe that
migrate because
migrate,
many fish do that.
many fish do that.
Will go around the planet, and they haven't been able to be kept in captivity for very long.
So,
because
Jacqueline, none of their sound is coming through. Can you relay any of their suggestions?
Sure. So we had a suggestion that maybe someone the fish in that area, and also maybe strong currents or migration brought the fish to your area.
All right. So, at this point, I'm not getting any sounds. So hopefully you guys are still hearing me. Can the students in Mr. Trogdon's class wave just to let me know that you guys are still hearing me? Fantastic. So I'm still coming through. That's great. In that case, we're just going to push right on ahead, and we'll see if we can't get the sound coming to me fixed here in just a little bit. So the other organism that we were going to feature for you guys today is our California pond turtle. So this is Jetty. The pond. This is the only non-marine organism that we have here at the Ocean Institute. Kind of an interesting story. California pond turtles live in fresh water, in lakes and streams and rivers and things like that. And they're pretty rare these days in this part of Southern California. We have lots of development, lots of people, and this is not an animal that does super well around those things. So we don't see too many of them. A number of years ago, a class that was visiting the Ocean Institute found this animal out on the jetty, on the seawall, the big stone barrier that keeps our harbor protected from the waves. And they realized, fortunately, that he didn't belong there, that a freshwater turtle was not going to do so well in the ocean. So they brought him here into the Ocean Institute, and we have cared for him ever since, and that's why his name is Jetty. Now, the question becomes, this is a freshwater turtle. We have a full mile between where we're standing now and where it was found, and anywhere that this animal might have naturally lived. So it is possible he could have walked that mile, but as we know, turtles are pretty slow. And this turtle, being a aquatic turtle, needs to kind of stay wet and stay moist and can't be fully dry for that long. Also, to walk that mile, he would have had to cross a number of roads. And so seems unlikely that he's going to walk a mile from San Juan Creek to get here to the seawall. The other possibility, and the one that we think is more likely, is that someone collected him. They found him in a creek or a river or a pond somewhere. And this animal looks like he could be an interesting pet, something I want to take home and keep in my house. They collected him. Maybe they kept him for a while. Maybe they couldn't figure out what it was that he ate. Maybe he was too much work to clean up after. Anyone who's had pet turtles know they are a bit on the messy side, and if you don't keep their habitats clean, they are very, very smelly. So, and then after a while decided that maybe it was that Jetty the pond turtle wasn't the right pet for them, and decided to leave him here on the seawall. But of course, whomever did that did not have a good understanding of what aquatic turtles need to survive, because this animal could not have lived in the ocean. So he's lucky that he was, caught and brought here so he could survive. But when we talk about impact, that's another really significant one that we can have, is directly impacting animals, whether it's catching them, getting too close to them, anything like that. And then, of course, catching an animal and then releasing it into a habitat that it's not appropriate for is definitely a major issue. All right. So Jacqueline, any sound on your end that maybe we could relay some questions?
Can you hear me?
My folks at EarthEcho.
Can you hear me?
I can see you, but I definitely can't hear anything that's coming through.
Can you hear us, Nathan?
All right. So, Jacqueline, I'm going to sign off super quick. Try and go back through the link and see if I can get the sound that way. Hopefully, you'll be able to have some questions ready for me as soon as I come back.
Sounds good. Mr. Trogdon, what were some of the questions that your students have? We'll wait till Nathan rejoins us. So maybe I can answer some of them for you.
Yeah, Matthew had a question for Nathan. Go ahead, Matthew. He's an eighth grade science student.
How have the recent fires?
So I'm hearing Jim now, which is great. So I am getting some sound coming through.
Okay.
Jacqueline, do you have some questions for me?
You actually have a student in Mr. Trogdon's class that has a question for you. So if you can hear him, he's going to ask you himself.
Okay.
How have the recent fires affected wildlife in the area and air and water pollution?
So I heard protected wildlife, and I heard air and water pollution.
Also,
and
how
can you just give me any more details on that?
Yeah, the question was, how have the recent fires impacted the ecosystems?
Gotcha. Yes. So the fire is impacting the air and water pollution. So for those of you that don't know, we have wildfires raging throughout Southern California. Here in Orange County, we're fairly fortunate at the moment. We don't have any fires burning nearby, but in parts of Los Angeles and San Diego counties, which are not far from here, there are very destructive wildfires going on. And so there's a few ways that those impact marine ecosystems, short-term and some more long-term. All of these fires are putting a lot of smoke and ash into the air. And eventually, some of that smoke and ash and that particulate matter is going to end up in the ocean. It could get into animals. It could change the water chemistry. That's a long-term impact. The other thing that we see a lot with wildfires is we get significant mudslides afterwards. The plants that are burning, the trees, the shrubs, the grasses, that all holds the soil together. And when they burn, there's nothing holding that soil in place. And especially here in Southern California, our soil is very sandy, and there's just not a lot to it. So after a wildfire, the next time it rains, we're going to get a ton of dirt and material washing into our rivers and streams and then into the ocean. And all of that sediment and particulate matter is also going to impact the wildlife and the habitats, especially in coastal areas, estuaries in particular, where the ocean meets a freshwater source, are definitely going to be impacted with the runoff and sediment.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Jacqueline.
Nathan, can you hear me? Looks like we have. All right. Nathan? Can you hear me? Looks like he can't hear us. Hopefully he'll be back with us in just a second. Um, does anyone from Mrs. Shelby's class or Mr. Trogan's class have questions that I could answer? And we did, before you guys, sorry, one second, before you guys ask those questions, we did have a question about the turtle that we saw earlier. And the species is a freshwater California pond turtle, and his name is Jetty. That question? Mr. Trogan's class, did you guys have any other questions?
Yeah, we have another question from Kyle. He's an 8th grade student.
Awesome.
Have you noticed significant changes in marine mammal and fish counts in the past 5 years? If so, what do you attribute to this?
Nathan, were you able to hear that?
I can speak to that.
Awesome.
So when it comes to marine mammals and the fish counts, we do have started to see some changes. Year to year, you know, it's always different. In particular, this past summer, we have a blue whale migration, and we saw far fewer blue whales this summer than we have in probably 10 or 15 years. And so I can't give you any reasons why. You know, the data set isn't big enough. And at this point, I would be making a correlation, and we don't have any reason to kind of say what is causing it. But it is certainly possible that something like climate change or water pollution is affecting that population, or where they're going. If water temperatures change or water currents change, that would definitely affect those animals. And I'm not saying that it is, but it is if we see this trend over a long time. You know, if we see a significant decrease in the number of whales that are passing through, and we are starting to measure changes in water salinity or water pH or the temperature or water currents, that would be how we would try and establish a relationship. One of the interesting things about the ocean environment in general is that it's much more dynamic than terrestrial environments. Populations can move great distances in a relatively short amount of time. So tracking these animals becomes very interesting, and trying to establish trends and patterns online.
Going back to the sea stars, Hughes Learning Academy in Washington Elementary School would like to know what exactly is causing the sea star wasting disease, and how can we help prevent that die-off of the sea stars?
So I'm still having a really hard time hearing, but I do understand there was a question about the die-off of the sea stars. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what is causing the disease? And is there anything we can do to help prevent that disease?
So we want to talk about what's causing the die-off, and is there anything that we can do to help? And the short answer is we don't know. It could be climate change, it could be pollution, or it could be something else that we're introducing to the water that's causing other species to outcompete the sea stars. Fertilizer, for instance, might cause, you know, types of algae to bloom that would then impact the ecosystem. And so it's really specific things that we could do, but I can tell you that it's always a really good idea to make sure that we're not putting stuff into the water that we shouldn't. Out here in California, in most of the country, anything that we put down a drain ultimately may end up in the ocean. So it's not just about avoiding going out to the beach and dumping something in the water. We need to make sure that we're not putting chemicals and pollutants in any of our water systems. Beyond that, I think for sea star wasting, that we need to start really looking at ways to slow or solve climate change. While I did mention that we don't know for sure that climate change is causing the sea star wasting, if we are able to slow or stop climate change, it's going to have lots and lots of positive impacts, and hopefully might keep that sea star wasting from happening. So always a good thing.
All right, and we have a question from Adelie, who's watching on YouTube, and she would like to know what happens to something like a saltwater fish if it gets thrown into fresh water?
Great, that's an excellent question. What happens to a saltwater fish if it gets thrown into fresh water? And the answer is, unfortunately, they would die. A freshwater animal would die in saltwater. A saltwater animal would die in freshwater. So think about that fish and aquatic organisms often breathe with gills. Gills are the thin membranes in the sides of their neck that allow oxygen to transfer water to their body, to their bloodstream. Our lungs actually function the same way, but it's just getting the oxygen from air instead of water. And when the water chemistry changes, and when it's different from what that organism was adapted to live in, they can't breathe. So unfortunately, a freshwater organism would suffocate, or a saltwater organism would suffocate in fresh water. Now, just like with almost everything we deal with in the world of science, there are exceptions. There are specific animals that are adapted to live in both freshwater and saltwater environments. I think the most common and most well-known is our salmon. Salmon are a fish that some people really enjoy eating, that also happen to spend their adult life in the ocean, but they're born in freshwater. They're born in lakes and streams. And so they start as a freshwater organism, then they go out to the ocean, they live, and then they actually come back to the freshwater to spawn and have babies. So that's just one example of an animal that can do both.
Excellent, thank you. Imperial Middle School would like to know what ways at school can students help with the contamination of plastics in our ocean? Were you able to hear that one, Nathan? So the question was, what ways it's from Imperial Middle School, and they would like to know what ways they can help with the contamination of plastics in oceans, in our oceans at their school.
Great. So we want to talk about how we can help prevent or work with plastics and contamination in the oceans at our schools. So the first thing is that if your school doesn't recycle, starting a recycling program would be a great way to try and get that plastic out of the ocean. Picking up litter is a great way, especially if you live somewhere where it rains a lot. Plastics, small pieces of trash that are on the ground, when it rains, that's going to get washed down into the sewer system. And if you're in a coastal area, that sewer system may empty right into the ocean. Here in Orange County and Southern California, our cities and towns and counties spend a lot of time and money collecting trash out of our urban water systems before it gets into the ocean, to try and keep it out. So if you can pick up the litter, make sure that trash is in the appropriate location, make sure it's recycled if it's plastic, you're really going to help keep those out of the ocean. And then again, I think we talked a lot about building awareness and educating people around us. Everyone who participated in this class today, this virtual field trip, can take what they've learned and tell their parents, tell their friends, tell their families, tell anybody that you meet about how important it is to keep those things out of our oceans and out of the water systems. And that's going to have a really significant impact, just spreading that knowledge and awareness, because there are lots of people out there who don't know and don't understand how, you know, putting a candy wrapper or a chip bag on the ground in the parking lot could affect sea turtles in the ocean, but it absolutely does. And if we educate them about that, then there's a really good chance maybe next time they won't do it.
Thank you. So we have a question from Shakira, and she wants to know, what is the purpose of the patterns on the turtle's shell that we saw earlier?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. We want to know about the purpose of the patterns on the turtle's shell. It serves a couple of different purposes, but primarily camouflage. This animal in water, in swampy areas, in grasses, and these help protect it from predators. And this animal is a carnivore. It is a predator itself, so it helps it on its prey. I will show you one really interesting aspect of this animal, and it's something lots of animals have in common. It has a very light belly and a very dark back. And a lot in both aquatic animals and in birds. Down on it like this, say if it were in the market, it would blend in really well with the dirt, with the grass, things like that. But if looks like my video is now frozen a little bit. Being if we can look up at it, might see that its lighter belly would blend in with things like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan.
So that they call it true colored camouflage, is something we see in lots.
Thank you, Nathan. So you cut out just a bit, but just to review what he said, the patterns on the turtle shell and his belly are mostly used for camouflage, so it helps them blend into their environment. Nathan, I have two questions that are similar, so I'm going to ask you to answer those, and then we're going to wrap up. So the questions are the marine animals still getting affected from the oil spill years ago that was in the Gulf? And that's from Wesley Cross. And then we have a question from Andrew Lewis. And he wants to know, how far does an oil spill affect fish? And it looks like we may have lost Nathan. There he is.
This is one that I'm going to have some trouble speaking specifically on regarding the to get out of terrestrial or marine environment once it has gotten in there. You know, we've had some oil spills in California, and even, you know, years later, we're still getting oil washing up on beaches occasionally and things like that. So it is a very destructive and very impactful event, and one that we need to take a lot of precautions to prevent from happening. But beyond that, I have to say I'm not knowledgeable on oil spills. But it would be a great thing to research and look up and study for yourself.
Definitely. And I think that animals are still being affected by the oil spill that happened in the Gulf of Mexico, I'm assuming is where that question is from. And also oil spills can affect fish, not only right near the oil spill, but from far away. The oil can be taken in the ocean currents and taken far, far away and impact organisms that way. All right. Well, I want to thank Nathan for taking us on this virtual field trip of the Ocean Institute today. And I'd like to thank our classroom. So Mr. Trogan and Mrs. Shalaby, thank you so much for joining us live.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who is watching with us. Just a little plug, our expeditions, materials from our 2017 expedition, Water by Design, will be launching on January 17th, 2018. So teachers and students, make sure to keep your eyes out on our website for those. We will send a follow-up email to answer any questions that we didn't get to live today. And I want to thank everyone so much for their time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
See you, Nathan.
Bye, everyone.